Ananiah, Mishael, and Azariah trying to fulfill Jeremiah's call to work for the shalom of the city. And like others who had been recruited to serve in King Nebuchadnezzar's court, they are about to embark on 3 years of training. The training is designed to erase their Hebrew identities and assimilate them into the culture of Babylon. This is under King Nebuchadnezzar. So the first step in this primitive brainwashing is to change their names. They would now be known as Belshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That is in Daniel 1:7. And in the ancient world, naming someone had great significance. And maybe one of these days I'll also pick it up as a subject of interest, that naming it was not just in that time, in those times, but naming is very significant in a person's life. And these very well-selected Jewish boys had to change their names to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Belshazzar. Most of you are still young, or reasonably young. Those are young. Please, when you are naming your children, if God blesses you with a child, it is not your prerogative, you, to name the child. I think it's very important to seek your parents' nod. They might not give you the name, but just seek their nod so that they bless the child. I know we have all nice names. We want to name our children, but allow them to pronounce some name, however primitive in quotes it sounds. Those are eternal blessings. So God has blessed me with many children, and now I have 12 grandchildren. And I take a lot of pride when I am consulted and I give a name and I tell them, this name you will not remove or touch. You can add the other fancy names. Because deep in my heart, I am referring to my ancestral lineage, or a very strong genetic bond. So one of my children got a child, and I said, I had only one aunt on this earth, and she loved me, and she passed on. She was not anything, just an ordinary village woman, but with a great soul. So we shall name her. Of course, it doesn't sound very fancy, but I delight when I see that girl growing. The mother passed on. When I see the girl growing and being top in her class and always smiling and playing football and so on. But I'm just saying naming. I know some of us in our customs, we name after our parents directly. Yeah, so be it. So Paul writes in his introduction to the prophets, to rename someone is to claim far-reaching power over that person. So as part of the indoctrination, the young Hebrews would be trained in the language and literature of Babylon and live in the king's palace, eating the rich food of the king's table, Daniel 1:4-5. But Daniel resolved or as the King James Version says, Daniel purposed in his heart not to defile himself by eating the food from the king's table. Daniel 1:8. I am talking about faith and obedience to God. Outwardly, Daniel may have looked Babylonian, but inwardly, in his heart, he remained a Jew, a follower of the Most High God. So Daniel's request for a different menu is initially turned down by the king's chief of staff. But he perseveres and gets an attendant to agree to a test, Daniel 1:12. And after 10 days of only vegetables and water, Daniel and his friends look even better than those on the king's diet and are allowed to continue with that diet for the duration of their training. Daniel 1:15-16. So, in summary, obedience to God and faith in God. When you have faith in God, when you have obedience to God, you are actually allowing God to work. Yeah, because you must be subsumed into your belief in God. And the passage I'm reading to you is a very familiar passage. Does not tell us why Daniel and his friends did not want to eat the king's food. Why didn't they want to eat nyama choma and pork, sausages, and pizza if it was there, you know, all those nice things? It may have been because the food was unclean, not kosher, the Jews, or that it had been sacrificed to idols. In their circumstance, to eat the food would have gone against Jewish law, Leviticus 11 or Deuteronomy 14. Now, according to this theologian, Joyce Baldwin, in her commentary in the book of Daniel, another reason may stem from an ancient Near East practice. Eating from the king's table was to enter into a bond of fellowship with him, effectively acknowledging devotion to Nebuchadnezzar as Daniel's covenant Lord. So one of the most important things is that obedience, faith allows God to work in you. And my summary to all of us is that obedience and trusting in God is such an important aspect of one's life. Notice I'm talking about God. So even our Muslim brethren on this call is the same. Obedience and trusting in God is very important. So Daniel was determined not to assimilate into the Babylonian culture when it was possible for him to actively resist. It was possible for him to actively resist. In his resistance strategy, Daniel displays three principles that apply to all of us who are struggling to be faithful in the midst of godless culture. So first, Daniel resolves, decides, purposes, makes up his mind to be holy and not to be absorbed into the adultery of the Babylonian culture. Second, Daniel does not carry out his resistance in an arrogant or obnoxious way. Underlined, does not carry out his resistance in an arrogant or obnoxious way, but exercises his opposition with genuine humility and grace. I'm talking about humility and grace. In fact, and that's my message for today. Faith, obedience, genuine humility, and grace. By the way, we are struggling as families, we are struggling as societies, we are struggling even as a nation because we are not engaged with genuine humility and grace, we are not putting on the apron of humility. And third, Daniel exhibits faith, trusting in the power and promises of God and expecting God to respond in his faithful obedience. And I know most of us who are believers and Christians know the words of the hymn, trust and obey. I think may we exhibit faith, trusting in the power and promises of God and expecting God to respond to his faithful obedience. Please find time when you have time, just marvel at who Daniel was and what then God did in his life and what lessons we learn from him. So what obedience looks like in the world stems from utmost faith in God and trusting him in everything that we do. So I really would like to encourage all of us as we go through this class, exercise utmost obedience and humility, and you'll be surprised what God will do for you in this program. Kara, are we there?
Yeah, we were actually.
You have all gone very silent, but that is
No,
my
we are actually waiting. We're waiting for you to end this.
That is my message for today. But the worldly message, that was biblical, but the worldly message is the power of humility. I cannot overemphasize what this is. So I would like Dr. Mwaka to get me, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4 readers. And this is based on the obedience, and obedience anchors itself on humility. Are you seeing this screen, everybody?
Yes, we can see.
Yes.
Okay. Can I have 3 readers? I hope it's bold enough if we're not struggling. Gloria, Mary, Pauline, and Tracy. Let's go. Let's start with the first one.
Okay, Prof. Intellectual Dispatches by Professor Laban Ayiro, Motivational Thoughts. The Power of Humility. In genuine humility, there is enormous power. Free yourself from the demands of your ego, and there is no limit to where you can go. Let go of your desire to control others, and you vastly improve the ability to control, focus, and direct your own actions. Let go of the illusion that you already know it all, and you open yourself to higher levels of enlightenment. Move beyond the need to blame, and you gain a greater degree of responsibility. Get past the impulse to place judgments on others, and you're able to focus much more clearly on matters of real and lasting value. Give up the thought that you're better than everyone else, and a whole new world of opportunity opens up to you. Stop seeking unfair advantage, and you're free to develop an unstoppable effectiveness. Quit demanding the most and start expecting the best. You'll experience a level of true abundance that you never before could have imagined. Live each moment with humility, love, respect, and gratitude for the whole of life that surrounds you, and you will find a treasure that has no end.
Thank you. Wow, wonderful reading. That has pleased my heart in the morning. The power of humility. And many of these existential realities or pronouncements we make are anchored in the Bible. And I've told God to allow me every time to impart this simple virtue through practice. I think many of us, by the way, just cast your eyes into your family, cast your eyes into society, and you see many people who are driven by their ego. But these thoughts, normally I write these thoughts when I'm in soy under the trees, or when I'm in the garage, my study reading. In genuine humility, there's enormous power. So free yourself from the demands of your ego, and there is no limit to where you can go. And I'll be dispatching this to you. Pick something out of it. Give up the thought that you're better than everyone else, and a whole new world of opportunity opens up to you. Stop seeking unfair advantage, and you are free to develop unstoppable effectiveness. But ladies and gentlemen, the last sentence, this is what I try to do. I'm not perfect. I have my own shortcomings. But try to live each moment with humility, love, respect, and gratitude. For the whole of life, whether you are driving a Probox, or you have no car, or you are driving the top range car in the world, just have gratitude for that. That life that surrounds you, appreciate it, and you'll find a treasure that has no end. So the power of humility. The second reading, who is next?
Mary. Always give the best. In order to experience the best life has to offer, you must give the best of who you are. There is no other way. True fulfillment does not ever come from possessions, relationships, or experiences alone. Fulfillment comes from what you do to put real substance and meaning into what you have. The success you desire in life does not depend on the image you are able to project. Success is as a result of the authenticity with which you live your life in every moment. If you attempt to cheat life, the best you can hope to get are mere tokens of success. You deserve much more than that. So go ahead and put in the effort and commitment necessary to make each day truly meaningful. Do the work to be honest, creative, productive, and generous in your own unique way. Give your best to life every chance you get. And what you'll get in return is a life that's rich and full and increasingly satisfying.
Yes. And many times I lament in my heart when I see people not giving. Again, 1 Peter 5 was 1 to 5. Put on that apron of humility, because God exalts the humble and gives grace to them. So you see, you are given an opportunity to work. And many of us are cheated by positional equity. So, Ayiro, how can you teach and you're a vice chancellor? Why are you teaching? But what is my essential reason for existing on this earth? Is to teach. So when you get a position and you now don't do what you're supposed to do, then the desire or the success you desire in life will not come your way. I always marvel at our eminent heart specialist, Dr. Gikonyo. Every time I meet him in Karen Hospital, he's dressed up to the theater. Look at him. Just look at him and see when you give the best life has to offer. Where does God take you? And by the way, the success you desire in life does not depend on the image you are able to project. You must be authentic. So some of you are leaders, you do things to try and blind your followers, but you're not authentic. So when I was a provincial director of education, I would walk into a school and I would see the principal's name on the timetable. And he says, I teach. But me, I don't do that. I simply walk to that class. Once I see your name on the time, I walk to class. And I go in and pick a few books. Ladies and gentlemen, if you attempt to cheat life, the best you can hope for to get are mere tokens of success. That's why some people have remained stagnant. People graduate with PhDs, they go to universities, they start dashing from one lecture hall to another, one university to the other. I used to see it in Moi. Somebody leaves Eldred, gets into Matatu, goes to Kericho, does a class in Moi up to 9, gets into Matatu to Kericho, goes to Kericho campus, then gets another Matatu, goes to Bomet, then in the night comes to Nairobi campus. They are still doing that today. Unfortunately, there are no longer those classes. Yes, you deserve much more than that. So my advice there is give your best to life every chance you get. And what you get in return is a life that is rich and full and very, very satisfying. Third reader.
Embrace the responsibilities. It's easy to be resentful about your responsibilities and commitments and to see them as burdens. It's much better to enthusiastically embrace the positive opportunities they offer. Fighting against yourself and your own obligations is never in your best interest. Take the high road, gracefully accepting and fulfilling those obligations. Every area of responsibility gives you the chance to make a positive difference in the world. Each obligation is an opportunity to add value to life. Create the value and put yourself at a significant advantage. Embrace the responsibilities and feel the power that your responsible behavior brings you. It's true that not everyone is willing to move life forward. Yet, those who actually do move life forward are the ones who benefit most from the resulting progress. Choose to get the most out of life by consistently giving your best to life. Honor your commitments, meet your obligations, and truly enjoy the goodness that you are helping to sustain.
Very good. Thank you for the reading. I wish I could say a lot here because I've seen many people ruined in life by simply not embracing their responsibilities. They try to cheat life. I know we are taking a bit of more time here, but I think that's who we are as Daystar. We are compelled to rope in spiritual aspects and value systems. So I'll move the lessons as I had planned, since you had done the reading earlier. But embrace your responsibility. And I just want to give you one illustration here. I entered Jogo House after being the principal of Sunshine in Nairobi and then going to the province, and then I came to Jogo House. And I met two people who changed my life. One was the late Professor Karega Mutai, and may God rest his soul. A very demanding person to work with. So there was some report about universities in Kenya by Kabiru Kinyanjui. A report of 500 pages. And that time I had come in as a deputy director. And Professor Karega called me and said, I want you to look at this report. We must make a summary of this report for President Kibaki. And you and me know Kibaki cannot read 500 pages. So we are going to reduce this to 50 pages. But Ayiro, you will not leave anything out, anything important. You must have every important aspect in this summary. So we worked with him, and I'm giving him credit. He shepherded, he advised, and I would summarize a chapter into 1 or 2 pages, and he would take his red pen and blue and black. He had all the 3. And tell me, you know, Ayiro, some of you, I don't understand. Me, I only went up to class 4, and I self-taught myself to be a professor. What is this? You went to Mangu High School. I can't see it in you. So we struggled with him, and I have those drafts, by the way. They're very special. I've kept them in my archives, where he would correct and say, note this, and sentence by sentence. Eventually, we came out with a document of around 50 pages, the abridged version. If you go to government press, you'll get the abridged version of the inspection board report by Professor Kabiru Kinyanjui. And so it was time to take the report to Professor Saitoti. And I was not there. So Karega, I was in my office. So Karega as a PS took the report. So Saitoti in the evening went with it at home, came back the following morning and asked Karega, which officer did you work with? And Karega said, I don't even know his name, but he's on 9th floor. So I was called. And those days when you were called by a minister, it was a high calling. So I got into a lift, went to 2nd floor, running and wondering what mistake had I done. A minister to call a deputy director? No, it didn't work. What I see in government today, really, I don't want to use this word, but it pisses me off. There is no respect. And people are very casual. And you wonder, how are we going to build this nation of Kenya? So I go to Saitoti's office, and the secretary says, are you so-and-so? Yes, you are the one, yes. And you know, Saitoti's office would be packed in the waiting room with the people, because he was also a politician. So I bypass those people, I go to the office, and Saitoti stands up and says, my PS is telling me you worked with him on this. I said, yes. Oh, okay, where did you go to school? I told him, I went through Mangu and what was. Oh, I was also at Mangu. That was the turning point in my life. And he told Karega that from today henceforth, I wasn't a professor, I was not a doctor, I was just Laban Ayiro. He will be my official speech writer as long as I'm a minister in this ministry. Do you know that single pronouncement allowed me to go through 57 capitals of the world? There was nowhere Saitoti went and I was not there. So please embrace responsibilities. You know, responsibilities sometimes come as torture. So some of you, the teachers who are on this call, or even other officers, I know this is a mixed class. Some of you, you are very happy when no work comes to your desk. And you say, me, I have no problem. I just go to the office. So long as I appear, I'll go away. There's no work. In the schools, you tell others, you people keep working like donkeys. Me, I'm okay. Me, so long as I've taught my little class, I go in my car and I go away. You are a cancer unto yourself. So create that value and put yourself at a significant advantage. Embrace the responsibility. So for me, the 3 masters I did, the PhD, the postdoc, I never paid a single cent. They are all sponsored by the government of Kenya. So please choose to get the most out of life by consistently giving your best to life. Honor your commitments, meet your obligations, and truly enjoy the goodness that you are helping to sustain. Last reader, and then we move to our class.
Who you are inside. When you can see beauty, you become beautiful. When you can appreciate and value achievement, you become successful. What you build and treasure within you flows into every corner of your life. What you have within you is what you truly have. Fill your heart with love, and love will soon surround you. Fill your thoughts with gratitude, and abundance will be yours. The priorities you hold with you will determine the realities you come to know. Those things you treasure deeply will grow and fill your world. The person you appear to be the outside is only a faint reflection. It is who you are inside that really matters. Fill yourself inside with love, with authentic purpose, with joy and hope and faith and goodness. It will all flow out from you in a bright and splendid way.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful reading. And you read it the way I wanted it read, so that it sinks deep. When you can see beauty, you become beautiful. When you can appreciate and value achievement, you become successful. And I like this. What you build and treasure within you flows into every corner of your life. And what you have within you is what you truly have. How I wish this would become a strong pillar in your lives. Because me, I've seen it happen. When I desire anything deeply, it comes to pass. So the priorities you hold within you will determine the realities you come to know. And those things you treasure deeply will grow to fill your world. Those of you who have read my book, the small book on institutional leadership, I remember sitting in an office in a Harambee school of 25 students with an office partitioned by Majambi, the papyrus. And the watchman bringing me a newspaper, I'd sent him to the market to bring me a newspaper. And I opened a central, those days Sunday Nation was so rich. I opened a paper, and there was this school, Kamuzu Banda School in Malawi. A president who had put up a school that was for the best children in Malawi. And I remember that Sunday morning asking God, I wish I had the favor to run a presidential school. It's very interesting. It's a reality that that was when I was just starting headship. 10 years later, I was miraculously appointed the first principal of Sunshine School in Nairobi, the school that belongs to Moi. What a privilege, those days. And by the way, that time it was not ethnicity. No, Your mother didn't have to be a relative. No. You are just, because of the performance of where I was given that singular privilege. So I want to urge all of us, fill yourself inside with love, with authentic purpose, even in this degree program. Those of you who diligently work through this program, your PhD will carry a different value from that other person who thinks, so long as I get this paper. So feed yourself inside with love, with authentic purpose, with joy and hope and faith and goodness. It will flow out from you in a bright and splendid way. Heavenly Father, we come before you this morning with thankful hearts and with a deep desire to be obedient to you, to walk in your faith, Lord, and to put on the apron of humility. Lord, allow us to do an inward search of who we are. And Lord, may we truly serve your kingdom in every position we are given. And Lord, with these thoughts, we want you to take over the class this morning. Continue to just bring us down to submit to you. Then our country will be a great country. For I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Okay.
Amen.
Thank you. Can we have, Carol, because of time, I'm inviting only two responses, reflections on, right from our reading about Daniel and these motivational thoughts on the power of humility, and then we'll move on to our class this morning.
Thank you, Prof. Very encouraged. Any mic that is open, go ahead. I see Lalails, I see Agnes.
I can take it up. Thank you,
Please do.
Prof, for that wonderful devotion. And it has made me get thinking about how do I present myself in all areas of my life? And what do people see? And it's just a reminder that whatever I do is not to make an impression in people to see me in a way that I look like I have it all, but to set out and do each and everything I do from the bottom of my heart to make this place a better place. And ultimately, that is what makes me up. Not the things that I own, not the things that I have, but what I'm able to do from the bottom of my heart, and that it has a positive influence on the people that I interact with. That calls for a lot of humility. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joseph?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Joseph?
Thank you, Prof, and thank you, Doc. I think for me, I would say, Prof, you have reminded us of our importance as a Christian. That is one thing, because you talk about the faith, and anybody who is about the faith, it is because we are all Christian and all we believe in God, and we have one mission, and that is the service to the humanity. And you have given us the core values, starting with the story of Daniel, coming back to the motivation, where we are looking the value that can make this service have a legacy. Because you can do all that, but what kind of a legacy do we leave at the end of the day? So that is my take, that all of us, we have to embrace the value of giving service, but within that service, we also have to, it has to be impacted with some particular values and principles that people will remember us because of those values and principles, like Daniel, and the people you have given, including you have given us an evidence-based. You have given us the story of Dr. Gikonyo, yourself, your testimony, your evidence yourself. So in this regard, we don't need to go and look for evidence somewhere else. You have already given us that evidence. And that's what I'll take home today.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you very much. We need to go to our research, so I will I just want you to ponder. We will send those intellectual dispatches. I have a lot of them I write. And that's part of leadership. That's part of development. That's part of psychology. That's part of communication. That's part of business. So it's very important. Now, I want us to always remember the process of research, so that you are with me, you don't get lost. Where are we going in this course? I want you to remember this. We started with identifying the research problem, and we spent adequate time. Of course, the test will be in the pudding when we do, and now it is official, we'll do our quiz on Saturday next week, God willing. The first quiz, 1 hour, then before I start going into class. So at 6 a.m., we'll have our first quiz. So we've looked at we have identified the research problem. We have looked at research gaps and the type of research gaps. There is review of literature, which I am jumping, and I want to go to the research purpose. But immediately I finish the research purpose, I'll go to the literature review. And then we'll go to data collection, analysis, and reporting. That is the research process. This is the cyclic ring, or the ring we are running through in this course. So I'd like all of us to be very clear of where our PhD program is going as far as research is concerned. So I wanted to bring you back here. Now, this morning, I would like to see how much I can cover. In beyond that, I would like to go to the purpose of research. And a lot of my teaching style is that I believe in a lot of repetition of concepts. I repeat concepts over and over again, just to make sure that everybody is at home, and to reinforce many concepts. So today I want to look at the purpose of research questions, and we'll move very fast because this was part of the reading from our class text, research questions and the hypothesis. So I'll run through it very fast, and hopefully I'm seeing I can actually start the literature review today as we move on, because I want us to go through all aspects of chapter 1. Then we shall start writing our zero draft of chapter 1. Then we'll go to chapter 2, which is mainly literature review in detail. Then chapter 3, methodology, and you should have your proposal. However crude it is, you should have a proposal ready for presentation. So specifying a purpose and research questions or hypothesis. I hope you'll be able to distinguish among purpose statements, research questions, hypotheses, and objectives. These are very important because after stating your problem statement, you have to tell me the purpose, you have to give me the research questions, the objectives, and the hypotheses. You should be able to describe why these statements and questions are important, And you must begin to be able to write quantitative purpose statements, research questions and hypotheses, as well as qualitative purpose statements and research questions. So we'll begin to break into the different designs insofar as the research questions are concerned. Now, look at this slide, and I'm going to go through it slowly. What is the intent of a purpose statement? The intent of a purpose statement is to give an overall direction. What is the intent of research questions? It is to raise questions to be answered. What is the intent of hypothesis? Is to make predictions about expectations. So you are making predictions, you go out to do research, and you see whether those predictions hold or don't hold. And what is the intent of research objectives? It is just to state the goals of the study. What form does a purpose statement take? It takes one or more sentences. So it is very brief. The same for research questions, hypothesis, and research objectives. Now, I'm saying one or more. I have seen purpose statements over half a paragraph, half a page. There is a word in research which I'll want you to note, and is a weapon Ayiro uses a lot. It is called parsimony or parsimonious. This is a communication school, and when you get an internal memo from a lecturer or even on WhatsApp, you just wonder. They will write and write and write and write. And my reply is always noted or we shall explore or extremely engaging or sounds controversial. I am being parsimonious. And by the way, most of the time I don't read those. I don't have the time to read all those long things. Once I see the gist, I say noted. I want you as a PhD student to be parsimonious and be frugal with your words. Be concise with your descriptions or your narrative. How do we use a purpose statement what is the use of a purpose statement? We use it in quantitative and qualitative research. So either have a purpose statement. Research questions will be found in both quantitative and qualitative research, in your proposal, in your thesis. Hypothesis is only and only for quantitative research because you are doing theory verification. Theory verification. So the other day we had a defense, and one of my students was criticized for not having all the research questions turned into hypotheses. I almost collapsed because, as I'm going to teach you, hypothesis is about variables. that are quantifiable. So if a student is doing a mixed methods research, you can't expect them to set up research questions and turn them into hypotheses. No, we'll only have a hypothesis where there is a relationship, where we have mainly data that can be put on a scale. It's rational. The ratio scale, it runs from very strong to very weak. So we can then set up a hypothesis. But when you have nominal or ordinal data, age, sex characteristic, and so on, you can't set up a hypothesis. That's very definite. And then research objectives are typically quantitative research. But I would encourage you, even when you are doing the qual, that is qualitative, to set up the research, the objectives and the research questions. Where do we find the purpose statement? It's at the end of the introduction. It is at the end of your problem statement that you tell us the purpose of the study. And how would you bring out your research questions, your hypotheses, and your research objectives? It is at the end of the introduction, after the literature review, or in a separate section of the study. So really, you can't come up with good research questions with hypotheses and research objectives until you have done the literature review. So it's very important to have that overall picture. Why are these important? Why are these statements important? They represent major signposts. So the purpose is a major signpost in research, just like the research question, the objective, or the hypothesis. Knowing, and let me go back to this, knowing the purpose, the research question, the hypothesis, the research objective, you are able to identify the appropriate methodology or methods. So you see how important it is. The type of research, the purpose, the type of research question, the type of hypothesis, or if you are setting up a hypothesis, we will know which methods you'd use in your research design, your sampling, your population sampling, your data collection and analysis. And most important, it helps link intent with the results. So you let alone find out, did my research questions give me what I was expecting? Did my hypothesis hold, or did we reject it? Now, what we need to know to design quantitative, note I've put that in bold, purpose statements, research questions, and hypotheses. Some of this information is very fundamental, but I don't want to assume, because I want you to have a level of understanding of research methods that will help you come out with a very strong PhD thesis. If I start assuming these are things they know, we'll have gaps in knowledge, and that is reflected in the thesis. So what we need to know to design quantitative purpose statements, research questions, and hypotheses. We must know what is a variable. We must know what is a theory. And we must know what elements go into these statements and questions. So once you have quantitative, once you talk about quantitative, you are in another domain. You are in another domain. And you must bear this in mind. So let us look at what is a variable. Let us not assume we know it. What is a variable? A variable is a characteristic or an attribute. And you only talk about variables when you are engaged with quantitative research. Quantitative research. You can set up temporary variables in qualitative research and then go and do observation and develop a theory, but mainly variables will be in quantitative research. And remember, it's a characteristic or attribute that can be measured, so can be assessed on an instrument and recorded on an instrument, and that it varies. That means it can assume different values or scores for different individuals. The variable. It can be measured and it varies. And it sits in the domain of quantitative research. So I want us to be very clear as we move on with the fundamentals. Now, these are examples of variables. Leadership style. It varies. It can be measured. We can measure the depth of transformational leadership in a leader. There are constructs that can measure that. We can measure organizational control, how much control is in a given organization, like the police force or the army, or even in a school. We can measure this sad condition of autism. But there are also variables that are difficult but possibly measurable variables, such as these ones. Look at socialization. How would I know your level of socialization? Oh, it varies. It's a variable because some people are social, others are not. Some societies are open, others are not. There is also imagination. How do you measure imagination? It varies, but there are now tools that can help you measure, but it's not easy. Intuition. Your level of intuition can also be measured. And then discrimination. But these are very difficult variables to measure. So know that there are variables that we can measure easily, and there are those that take quite an effort. And these are some of variables that are almost impossible to measure. Subconscious thoughts, world poverty, very difficult, and stereotypes. The message I'm sending here is that a variable is measurable and it varies. And some variables are very easy to measure. The tools are there, the instruments are there. Others are difficult, others are impossible to measure. When I introduce terms like this, there is a reason behind it. Categorical and continuous measures of variables. A categorical measure, this is now statistics, is a value of a variable assigned by the researcher into a small number of categories. So it is categorized. So, like gender, when I was born and up to about 2 years ago, gender was male and female. Now there's a third category on gender. A categorical measure. A continuous measure is the value of a variable assigned by the researcher to a point along a continuum of scores from low to high. For example, age, height, temperature, So this is a continuous measure, but it is on a continuum of scores. So height, age, weight. This is a continuous variable. A categorical variable is, e.g., gender, skin color. So those ones you can categorize them. How about, what is the difference between variables and constructs? So a variable is an attribute or characteristic stated in a specific or applied way. And a construct is an attribute or characteristic expressed in an abstract, general way. So note that a variable is a subset, generally, of a construct. And I want you to note these differences. So people speak, they kind of use those two interchangeably, but statistically is wrong. A variable is stated in a specific way. An attribute is expressed in an abstract general way. I'll give you examples. So look at those two. Let's pause for a moment. Look at those two. So look at that. A construct is student achievement, expressed in an abstract general way. A variable is a GPA, measurable, specific. Are they talking about the same thing? Yes, but one is specific, the other one is general. Let us look at families of variables in quantitative studies. A variable that causes, a variable that causes, a variable that instigates, a variable that stimulates is called an independent variable. The cause, the stimulant, the trigger, the imposing is our independent variable, X. And then we also have intervening variables. And we'll look at many later on, and I'm sure you encountered them in the book. And then we have the effect, the cause and effect. The effect is the dependent variable. So, CBC, what are the variables? Teacher capacity, independent variable. The ones you're going to manipulate. Teacher capacity, infrastructure, parental involvement, pedagogy. Those are independent. Why are we calling them independent variables? Because they'll cause effect to how CBC operates or gives us. What is the intervening variable on that one? Government policy is an intervening variable. I also am, and I'm not shy to hesitate. The Minister for Education, in charge of education, becomes a very critical intervening variable. Government policy, budgets from Treasury. And the dependent variable here will be quality products would be a possible independent. from our schools, or could be a functioning education system like CBC. That becomes the outcome. So remember, in variables, we have the cause and effect, we have the stimulus and response. Yes. And we also have control variables, which also can cause a change, control variables. So like in CBC, what is a measure, a big control variable? Of course, the control variable here is equity. There must be equity. Every child in Kenya must be sitting in a classroom that looks the same. Every time we are teaching computers, every child in Kenya, or 2 children or 3 children, will be sharing a tablet. That's a control variable. And there are also moderating variables, like our relationship with the donors. Those will be moderating variables. How do we relate to JICA or World Bank or UNESCO in support for CBC? That will be a moderating variable. It is a little farther away, but its influence can never be ignored. So the independent variable is the treatment, is the measured, is the stimulus, is the cause. And the outcome, the result, the effect is the dependent variable. I have mentioned here a very important variable, confounding variables. Confounding variables. You know, when, for example, you are a principal of a school and you go to a school like I'm now going to Bishop Gatimu Girls to talk to them, there are those things that they have already given me a brief. The number of laboratories, the number of what teachers. They have given me their performance for the last 15 years, 20 years, in fact. Those ones they have given me, some of the variables. And we know that Bishop Gatimu is one of our best national schools. When I was growing up, it was Ngandu Girls. But when I get to Ngandu Girls, I might not be able to explain why Ngandu Girls had only 16 A's and 68 A minus, and Kenya High School had about 70 A's and I don't know how many A minuses. The facilities are the same. The teachers are the same. The quality of students are the same. There are those confounding variables. Not the leadership style of the principal, no. By the way, the principal is at Kenya High, I'm told, came from Ngandu Girls. So it's not the principal. What are the confounding variables? These are, I want you to learn the word spurious. Spurious variables. Conniving variables. Ghostly variables. These ones are very hard to measure. And when you do a regression analysis, as you do in your statistics, you notice that some of these actually mask the intended results of the study. So one of those confounding variables is when a principal is ethnic-based. The first consideration, you must be of a certain tribe before you join that school. That is a confounding variable. I'm not saying that tribe can't give you results. They're giving you results, but maybe you could get better results if you overcame this spurious, ghostly variable. There are those hidden variables. So at Daystar, I could be having a problem with one of my deans or one of my HODs, and I'm wondering why Why is he not delayed? He has a PhD, we have facilities, and so on and so on. Then I discover, my God, there is a condition with one of his or her children. Or there is a problem with alcoholism, which in this setup of CBC, it is not visible as a variable to be measured, but it will have effects on the results. So families of variables, dependent variables, the DVs, we call them DVs, an attribute or characteristic. I want you to know, anytime somebody talks about a variable, it is an attribute or a characteristic influenced by the independent variables. So please don't come for defense and you're not sure between the difference between your DVs and IVs. So these independent variables, IVs, influence the dependent variable, DVs. So what are dependent variables? The outcome, the effect, the criterion, the consequences, the response. Those are all dependent variables. Then independent variables, IVs, an attribute or characteristics that influences or affects an outcome or dependent variable, DVs. We have the treatment variable. Yeah. So this is the one that is causing a change, treatment, measured variable, control variable, moderating variable, stimulus variable, cause variables. So all these affect the outcome, affect the response. Intervening variables, mediating variables, an attribute or characteristic that stands between the dependent and independent variables. It stands in between. And I've tried to give you an example. When you read in the book, there's even more examples. So you should be able to get to know these variables. These intervening variables cause a lot of problems. During research, and you need to be very clear about them. Now let's look at this, an example of an intervening variable. Like independent variable, convenient hours, office hours for students to see a lecturer. And what is the outcome? The student finds the lecturer to help them. But look at step 2. The independent variables remains the same, convenient hours, but there's an intervening variable. Student becomes willing to take the risk. In other words, sacrifice everything else to be able to see the lecturer. So you see, the independent variable is still convenient office hours. Intervening variable, the student becomes willing to take risks, like it is winter, it is raining, they are wherever they are, and they're able to find time, and they get help from the faculty. So that's an intervening variable. Families of variables continued confounding variables. Those are called spurious variables. I've been looking back on my days when I was a principal of a high school, or even when I was a senior deputy director at KEMI or at the ministry in charge of policy and planning, we had this hidden variable. Nobody wanted to go and carry out research within Nairobi. But when the research was in Nakuru, everybody wanted to go. And it becomes very interesting. Or somebody wants to go to Kisumu, but doesn't want to go to Mumias. There are certain confounding variables, attributes or characteristics that a researcher cannot directly measure because the effects cannot be easily separated from the other variables, even though they may influence the relationship between the independent and dependent variable. And even at family level, you look at family level, there are certain spurious variables that will affect a relationship, marriage, being a father or a mother, but they are hidden. Now, how does the theory come in? Because I'll be asking you to give me your theoretical framework. Tell me what it is in chapter 1, detail it for me in chapter 2. Theories as bridges between independent and dependent variables. So remember that. A theory is a bridge. That's why you cannot talk about hypothesis in qualitative research. Yeah, because you can see in quantitative research, the theory becomes very important, or the model becomes very important because it acts as a bridge between independent and dependent variables. Now, look at this framework, and I want to give you about 5 to digest this framework. Let me give you 5 minutes. Look at this framework.
Your 5 minutes to reflect on that, different types of explanation, quant research. Just look at that framework. So don't expect to hear Prof. It's a reflection. Just look at that diagram, extend it just on other researchers, broad abstractions, and then look at if there is no test, narrow application, broad applications, and then look at the diagram. It's a framework. Who's saying they can't see the screen as well? Danisa, you have a problem? Danisa, if you have a problem, probably you can, or you have a thunderstorm that side. Okay, that's probably your internet issue. I encourage you first leave and then join back. Leave and then join back, just to reboot your Zoom.
Yeah. Okay. Look at this, a quantitative research at the bottom. An explanation posed by the author as a hunch. A hunch is an idea for why the independent variable relates to the dependent variable. So you have a hunch, an idea, and then you have a theoretical rationale posed by other authors based on studies for the relationship. So you're going in the literature and you're going to see what did other authors say, the studies that were done. Then you then have a conceptual framework. So, by the way, I want the students to note that once you have an idea, a hunch, once you are pained, once you are disturbed, once you are constrained, you have a theoretical rationale posed by other authors based on studies for relationship. So you read studies around there, see what did the other author say. Then after that, you come out and you have a conceptual framework. You now conceptualize how the variables will come into play. And this is you to derive it after looking at what other authors have done. Then you have a formal theory that is expressed by connected hypotheses and variables identified by authors. So you now verify that. So it is narrow application to broad abstractions and extensive tests by other researchers that you're going to also collect data and verify. So what am I trying to say? I'm saying this: a quantitative researcher starts off with an idea, goes into the literature review to look at the theoretical rationale, gives us their own conceptualization, and then validates that theory. So it's important for us to note that. Look at a quantitative purpose statement. Identifies the variables, their relationship, and the participants and the site of research. I want to emphasize this. When I look at your purpose statement, I must, if it's a quantitative study, I must see the variables, how they relate, and I must know whether the participants are university students, or you're collecting data from university students, or you're collecting data from patients suffering from a certain condition, or you're collecting data from a school and looking at teachers teaching mathematics. And then you must tell me the site, the unit of analysis. Where will this be? So that constitutes a purpose statement. If I don't see these aspects in it, and it's a quantitative study, I begin to see how weak you are as a researcher. You use a single sentence, and I'm going into very basics because I want us to get it right. Use wording such as the purpose of this study. If you're using a theory, state the theory you plan to test, and use quantitative words like relate, compare, describe to describe the relationship between the variables. So that we would like to see. Still, make sure that the independent variable is the first position in the sentence, because it's the one that is going to cause change in the dependent variable, second position in the sentence. If you have control or mediating variables, you put them in the sentence, the research site and participants. Underlined, you must tell me where you're doing the study and who will be the participants. And I hope it's getting very clear. Quantitative research questions, you describe results for your variables, you compare, you relate. And I've given you guidelines of writing that, so these slides, you'll get them, you'll use them for reference as you construct your research questions. Hypothesis. Research hypothesis types. There is the null hypothesis. There is no relationship between 844 outcomes and teacher capacity. That's a null hypothesis. So no change in the dependent variable, no change in CBC, no change in 844, no change in SHA or NHIF against capacity, against resources like money. So there will be no significant difference in a test scores between 5th grade boys and girls on the KCSE achievement test. That's a null hypothesis. There will be no significant difference. Alternative hypothesis or directional specifies the direction of the change in the dependent variable, and the researcher predicts what will take place. So example, 5th grade girls will have higher scores on the KCSE achievement test than 5th grade boys. So there is direction, and you are saying there will be a change as a result of the independent variable. So please know there are other types of hypotheses, but I just want you to concentrate on those two. This is very difficult, but that doesn't stop you from using it. Non-directional alternative hypothesis. It doesn't specify the direction of the change in the dependent variable. For example, there will be a difference in test scores on the KCSE achievement test for 5th grade boys and girls. So there will be. It's not like the null hypothesis. There will be no significant difference. In this alternative hypothesis is that there will be a difference in the test of scores. Then you go, you take data, you analyze, and you verify. Now, research hypotheses are very important. And if you're doing quantitative or mixed methods, we shall expect you to set up the research hypothesis, state the variables in this order. You start with the independent, first position, dependent, second position, control, third position. When comparing, explicitly state the groups. If variables are related, specify the relationship between the variables. So is it an hypothesis or an alternative hypothesis? Make a prediction about changes you expect in your group. So say there will be or there will be. I mean, there will be or there will be no change. So you must state. And state information about the participants. Again, we repeat. We want to know who are your respondents and the site, unless it repeats information stated in another purpose statement. How do you design these qualitative? Now we are moving to qualitative purpose statements. Understand how these statements and questions differ from quantitative. Very different. And in a qualitative study, let me just do this. In a qualitative study, we talk about this. We talk about, and this is so important. Most students don't get it. This is so important. The central phenomenon. So in the quantitative studies, we talk about variables. But in a qualitative study, we talk about a central phenomenon. And it's very important, like here we are saying, the researcher should consider qualitative as being an emerging process. So you don't have a definite tool. As you go to interview people about a certain phenomenon like poverty or circumcision, variations will begin to come as they give you the answers. So remember, it is an emerging process. It's not a definite process like a quantitative study, where you're going to verify a model or a theory. So the central phenomenon is what we refer to, what we are chasing in a qualitative study. In a quantitative study, we are chasing the variables. So you need to know that. Now, what is the difference between quantitative, qualitative? Note quantitative more closed. Probable cause and effect. Why did it happen? We have theories. Why did it happen in view of an explanation of this theory? We look at the differences and magnitude. How much happened? How many times did it happen? What were the differences among the groups? So we're talking about the qualitative post statement, research questions, and even objectives. For qualitative, more open-ended. So it is an emerging process. Descriptive, what happened? Interpretive, what was the meaning to people of what happened? How did people interpret this? How do the Kikuyus from Central Province interpret circumcision? How about the Luyas? How do they interpret circumcision? So it's very, very important. What was the meaning to people of what happened? Like COVID, there'll be different interpretations. That's why you are an interpretivist or a constructivist when you are in qualitative data. It is a process-oriented. What happened over time? What happened over time? So Jamhuri Day celebrations, my God, when I was growing up and when I was working, at 12th of December, Kenya came to a standstill. Shops were closed. Chiefs were out there making sure that everybody is not doing anything other than listening to the radio, the TV, or going to the stadium. And I remember I enjoyed marching of the colors, trooping of the colors by our armed forces. I would have missed something if I did not watch that. And you know, those days recordings were not there. So it was live. If you missed it, you might not get it. But what has happened? Can somebody do a study? What has happened? Is there now a degeneration of the phenomenon we call patriotism? What has happened? So that is qualitative. Now, explaining of predicting variables versus exploring or understanding a central phenomenon. I really had wanted to, I don't know whether this would be too small, but I wanted you to note this. Let me bring this down. There. Explaining this word, this is explain. When you see the word explain, this, please note that is quantitative. Explaining or predicting variables. That's a concept we use for quantitative data. When you see the word exploring, this one, that is qualitative. And note, here we are predicting variables as we explain. So we are actually predicting variables. I want you to note that. We are predicting variables. Here, we are understanding a central phenomenon. We are understanding a central phenomenon. So it is so important that we get this right. Let me blow this out. Yeah, we get this right. So look at this. When we're dealing with quantitative design, we are talking about hypotheses. And so we shall be explaining or predicting the variables. When we talk about qualitative, we are searching for the central phenomenon: circumcision, marriage, advocacy, poverty, environmental degradation. That's the central phenomenon. And we are going to explore it in our qualitative study. So look at this one. Quantitative, explaining or predicting variables. Qualitative, understanding or exploring a central phenomenon. And so here we are predicting how X independent variable affects Y dependent variable. So the independent variable influences the dependent variable. Here, understanding or exploring a central phenomenon like democracy in Kenya requires an in-depth understanding of democracy by the people, their perceptions and conceptualizations. and external forces shape and are shaped by Y. So there is an interaction. Democracy itself influences us. That's why they say Kenya is stable. But also, us as Kenyans, us as Kenyans, us as Americans, us as Britons influence democracy in Kenya. So I'm hoping I am trying to unearth something here in your mind that when we talk about quantitative now at PhD level, you must be aware that we are trying to explain or predict the relationship between variables. When we are talking about qualitative, we are exploring or trying to understand a central phenomenon. By the way, it can be drug abuse. By the way, it can be mental health. By the way, in communication, it can be social media as our central phenomenon, the influence of social media. In psychology, mental health, or drug abuse and all that. In business studies, what phenomenon are we dealing with here? We could be dealing with economic flight. Why are people closing their companies, or why are people coming into Kenya? A central phenomenon. In development studies, the list can go on and on and on. But when we come to quantitative, we are explaining the impact of the finance bill on the economy of Kenya. We are trying to explain the subsidized fertilizer and its impact on maize production. So those are things that can be measured. We put in so much fertilizer, we have produced so many tons of maize. I want this to sink. Once we have these fundamentals in place, we shall run through our proposal and thesis very fast. So, whenever we talk about qualitative research, the focus of the research is around a central phenomenon, which is an issue or a process the researcher would like to study. The Gen Z movement is an interesting central phenomenon for study in Kenya. Tribalism almost subverts the constitution. It's an interesting phenomenon. Or ethnicity. Let me not call it tribalism. And qualitative research is built on an emerging design. So when you start studying Gen Zs, you will move with them from KFC kids eating hamburger and Coke to people who invaded parliament. And so it's an emerging design. You keep getting views and changing as you move. The elements of qualitative purpose statement, again, I don't want to go through this. You will note them, but I want you to note. You must have a statement identifying the type of qualitative design. That's our next topic next week, research designs. So is this a case study? Is this an ethnographic study? Is this a phenomenological study? You must know the central phenomenon. And use words like explore, understand, discover. And remember, over and over again, the participants and the research site is true for both quantitative and qualitative purpose statement. Types of qualitative research questions, I'll leave them for you to look at, but note there is a central question, there are sub-questions, and then there are interview questions that are asked during the interview and are based on the sub-questions and the central question. You look at that later. And that ends my slide on the purpose. And I really want to get back to this. I want to get back to, I don't know if I can get it. It's so important for us to work together, and everybody should know where we are going and not imagine and wonder, where are we going in this? Why are we going? We seem to be going huku na huku. So you need to know that cycle. We started with identifying the research problem. We looked at research gaps. So we are clear about that. And we are moving on. We have now finished the purpose statement, the research questions, the objectives, and hypotheses. And now we would like to go into the literature review. And I'll just introduce it briefly because of time. And then we'll pick it up in the next class. Just a minute. And if there are any questions, any observations, this is the time, Carol, you can pick it up.
Oh, you have two hands raised. Go ahead, Victor, and then Simon.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Oh, Victoria.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, thank you so much, Prof, for that elaborate session. I'll talk about an observation and then two questions. I'm relating to my thesis. And yes, I can see when you've talked about explaining a quantitative variable and exploring a qualitative variable, I've now been able to understand. When I was doing my research questions, there was an issue of writing or knowing which word to use. Will you use determining, examining, exploring, assessing? I think that has come quite clear now. Thank you for that.
Good.
Now, the question, my questions that I would pose, number one is about variables. Are variables different from indicators? Number two, when you're talking about the purpose statement, I remember when doing my thesis, we also linked it to the topic. After doing some explanation, then you say, you link the purpose to the topic. I just wanted you to briefly explain on those. Thank you.
Very good. If that indicator takes on different measurements over a continuum, it is a variable. But we could have indicators that are not variables. And you'll have to think very carefully. For example, you are an African or a Mzungu. That is an indicator of skin color or race. But it is under ordinal data. So be very careful. We are going to ask yourself, I'm going to ask you, can we create a scale of measurement from this variable? If we can, yes. If we can't, from this indicator. If we can, yes. If we can't, it isn't. Now, the purpose statement will be linked to your topic. Notice what we have said. It must have, if it is quantitative, it must have the variables. It must have the variables in the statement. Then it will have site and participants. I have issues, and we are going to discuss this later. I have issues with the PhD topic that talks about quality education impediments in Karachuonyo sub-county. I just have problems. I don't know why I have problems, but I have a problem. So we'll be discussing that. That's what you're trying to ask. Is the topic related to the purpose statement? Yes, it will have elements of the purpose statement, but you must be very careful, very, very careful that you don't over-localize your topic. You never become universal. And one time it will tell on you. One time it will tell on you. So be very careful. Yes. Next.
So thanks, Prof. Some of us, we've already started looking at how our proposals look like, and one of the things that has come out from this lecture is the independent and dependent variables. So in terms of the complexity of the design, and when you're going to do the identification of the design, data collection and analysis, what is the, for lack of a better word, easiest path to take in terms of even I don't know if it would be the right word, completion of your study, where you find you have a single IV with a multiple DVs, or where you have multiple IVs and a single DV. Which path would be easier to trade on? And I'm sure at PhD level, you don't want to find yourself with a single IV and a single DV.
No,
or
no.
Yeah. So yeah. Thanks.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Yeah. So which is the easiest path? Single IV, multiple DVs, or multiple IVs and single DV? Thanks.
No straightjacket answer, but it would be interesting how you would have multiple DVs. You know, you are, and this is on a light note, it's a joke. It's like we ask Kenyans, why do you engage in primitive accumulation of wealth? Why? Why do you engage in primitive accumulation of wealth? You have a house in Runda. You have a house in the coast, Nyali. You have a house in Akuru. You have a house in Kakamega. And I don't want to go beyond that. But I'm just saying, why do you want to engage in primitive accumulation of wealth? I can pose the same question. Why do you want multiple DVs? Leave it for other people. Tell us in your recommendations that this is, after doing this study, collecting data, analyzing, going in the field, my recommendation is that there should be a study carried out in this area. I'm just throwing my mind and being radical. Why would you want to do that? And the study becomes amorphous. I have no problem with multiple IVs. But again, I'm going to control you, because when we are doing a regression model, suppose it is a quantitative study, I would like us not to be overwhelmed by a regression model that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 beta indicator indices in the formula. So, but I'm excited because you are thinking like that. It means we are actually on the road. And when I finish wrapping up chapter 1, I hope to start seeing your chapter 1, and then we will work on it until it makes good sense. So that's a good question, but let us not, particularly the DVs. I would like to see 1 DV or 2 DVs maximum, because then it means you are going to set up, for example, if you want to know the influence of the IVs, you'll have to set up 2 models, regression models. And why do you want to do that? Yeah. Nothing wrong with it, by the way, get me right. But the question is, why do you want to do that? Yeah.
Thank you.
Rowena?
Thank you, Prof. I just had one question. In our class last week, the doctoral colloquium class, we were talking about critical thinking and different types of biases.
Hey, just a minute, just pause
Okay.
there a minute. Open. Already, I hope. Thank you very much. Okay, go ahead, Rowena.
Thank you, Prof. I was saying last week during our doctoral colloquium class, we were talking about critical thinking.
Hold on. Rowena, hold on a minute.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm doing too many things. Bad manners.
No problem.
Okay, asante sana. Thank you very much. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, I was saying last week during our doctoral colloquium class, we were talking about critical thinking and different types of biases. And as you are taking us through the sequence today, how we move from the hunch for why independent variables relate to dependent variables, going upwards to the formal theory, it just got me thinking, moving from why the independent variable relates to the dependent and upwards, looking at the different theoretical rationales posed by different authors, I thought about the confirmation bias. Yeah. And it got me thinking, I was wondering, are these biases a bad thing in research, or they're just things that we should be alive to? And also, what happens if you come up with a possible relationship and then you begin doing your literature review and you're finding nothing, that actually you're finding a contradiction in essence to your initial thinking? What happens in that case? Yeah.
Okay. Bias, you'll work with it. If you are my quantitative student, we shall reject it very early, because it will be reflected in the error, in your sampling error, before even we go into the analysis. I think it's very important as a researcher to be open-minded. And the dilemma you are saying you're going on, then you discover this is not quite what I was thinking. That's why I'm going to insist that we do extensive literature review. But we can also get into very interesting contradictions in our original thinking. Then we shall continue with the theory. With the thesis, give the results, but now discuss them as being unique and why. So and this is something I keep telling my colleagues. A PhD research must be allowed to wander. A PhD student must be allowed to argue and convince us about their stand. That's why we are putting them at that level. They should not be conformists. So yes, I'll be very excited to get into a situation where we are finding, my God, this is not what we expected. And those are our results, so we'll discuss them. But very rare to come around there. Unless you're doing grounded theory, it's very rare. All right, allow me to take just 5 minutes to introduce literature review, and then we will carry on with this next week. The first hour, you'll have a quiz. Then the second hour, you will engage. We shall continue with the literature review. And here, I just want to talk about literature review from a very different perspective. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this is what will distinguish you from that other researcher, that other PhD. I'm asking you to be open to reading. I'm asking you to be open to a lot of reading. Because that's why you want to become a philosopher. And as I was telling the World Vision Program in Naivasha, I was presenting our proposal. I was telling them, what is it about us that we always like dancing at the periphery? Why is it? For me, it's really troubling me. Dancing at the periphery. And we pretend we know. You know what I mean? We pretend. There's a very interesting article in the papers today on PhDs. That this local paper that has now gone digital is free. Very interesting article on the type of PhDs people are getting. Maybe I'll circulate it. Why do we dance at the periphery and pretend that we know? As African scholars. And we know, as I told you, the secret sits at the center, where there is heat, there is passion, there is truth, there is reality, there is beauty at the center. So as I enter into literature review, and I'm not covering literature review chapter 2, I'm covering it here so that you have it in mind to be able to reinforce how you're going to write your purpose statement, your research questions, your objectives, and the hypothesis. Later on, we shall come to chapter 2 proper and deal with literature review. So here I'm just doing a skeleton. I want you to read. You know, don't be like, you know, one time when I was the principal of Sunshine, everybody kept on saying, students are not getting high grades in English. They're not getting A's in English. Even when I was mentoring Kenya High for some time, English as a subject was a challenge until we discovered the Da Vinci Code, as they say. So in Sunshine, readers were bought in plenty from Form 1. And students just read books, and they loved exchanging books. But the teachers of English made sure that they read and summarize the book. They read a book, they summarize. Small books, they read, summarize. By the time they were getting to Form 2, Form 3, you didn't have to teach them the architecture of the English language. They didn't have to struggle with vocabulary. They also knew the beauty of being precise and concise. They valued the attribute of being parsimonious. But you get these students who go through Form 4 and get A's, but they have only read the set books. The set books, and they have memorized the set books and they get A's. Don't be like them in this PhD class. I want you to read the literature around your topic. That's why I'm punishing some of you to do, challenging some of you to do a meta-analysis, where you're going to look at tons of studies, set up criteria, reduce them, and then do analysis, and then tell us what are the variables. So for example, today we have more than 100,000 studies on COVID-19. So you don't need to do research on COVID-19. You only need to systematically review the literature, create criteria, and then do a meta-analysis. But that requires reading. When we say, go and read the chapter we gave you, chapter 5, if you read chapter 5, when I'm teaching these purpose statements and the rest, and hypothesis in quantitative, qualitative, you already are at another level. But you know, that's hard for us to measure. Until, of course, the exam next week on Saturday is when we'll measure and see how many really immersed themselves in understanding the purpose, the research question, the research objectives, and hypothesis. So reading is very critical. So that's why we do a literature review. We want to, first of all, just to honor those who went before me in this area and what they found out. That's the first thing. Secondly, in reading that literature, I'll find a gap, whether it is methodological, whether it is knowledge, whether it is application, whether it is theory, that I cannot pick up and call it my topic. But let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the bigger thing is that you only become if you punish yourself. That's how you become. And it begins with the literature review. So what is literature review? These are some of the statements that come through. Sorry. Those are the statements that come through. Look at them. So it is a summary of the literature. It is a critique of the literature. It is a synopsis of the literature. It is a critique of the literature. It is a comparison and contrast of the literature, to compare and contrast the literature. And when you are doing literature, it should be based on themes. And then eventually, this last bullet, it shows the gap. It documents a need for your proposed study. It documents a gap that you need to fill. You need to study and give us knowledge around there. Let us look at literature review in a quantitative study. Then I'll stop after a few slides. We'll carry on from here. And Magdalene, please note that for next week. In quantitative study, documents the importance of the research problem at the beginning of the study. Because we'll have read literature, we'll have pulled out the gap. It supports the theory or explanation, not exploration, explanation used in the study. So this is quantitative. Foreshadows the research questions. It foreshadows, it anticipates, it begins to spit out the research questions. And it provides an explanation for the results in other studies and in the theoretical prediction at the end of the study. So you just have to sit in that space, and you don't sit there as a manamba or a geocaching mechanic. No. You become part of that congregation. You know who are the strong authors in this area. What were the theoretical frameworks used, and how do I align myself to them? In a qualitative study, it documents the importance of the research problem at the beginning of the study, and note that it is like the same, it's the same as in quantitative. Does not, you see, does not foreshadow the research questions. It doesn't. Because these are broad in scope and emerging. So broad in scope to encourage participants to provide their own views. So you'll get very interesting views about that phenomenon that you're studying. So it doesn't align itself to predictability. And it is used to compare and contrast with other studies at the end of the study. So we normally do literature review in qualitative studies just to see what have the authorities found out about this phenomenon and how does it relate to mine. That's the difference. What is the process of conducting literature review? What process? Number one, identify key elements. So the terms in the study. Locate the literature. Where is it? Critically evaluate and select the literature. Critically. And this is where the supervisor comes in. And so when we start with the topic, I'll keep taking you back and forth. Just in chapter 1 to see how we shall construct the introduction of chapter 1. How do you evaluate and select the right literature? Then you organize the literature into your chapter 2 now, and then you write a review. Identifying key terms, write a preliminary working title for the project, and select 2 or 3 keywords that capture the essence of the project. This is the central phenomenon in qualitative. These are the variables in quantitative. Pose a short general research question that you would like to answer in the study. What is it that you want to answer? Look in catalogs for terms to find words that match your topic. In other words, go and mine the studies that are available. And scan the contents in your library stacks and the table of contents of educational journals or development study journals or communication journals, as the case may be. I would like to stop here for today, but we have now entered literature review from a chapter 1 perspective. I haven't gone to chapter 2. Yeah, after this, I'm going to research designs. After you knowing the value of literature review, we'll go into research designs. And then we quickly do aspects of scope, that is limitation, delimitation, assumptions, and then conceptual framework, and we'll have finished. Thank you very much. We'll stop there for today. Over to the coordinator.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. And just, even as a person, I can't say I always literally continue learning around this area. And I was just bragging with these students on their WhatsApp, telling them how I personally give you a lot of appreciation for mentoring me in research area to give me the courage to publish with the best universities, around 8 publications that are coming up. And one of it that is just come up with about 77 researchers across the world, and some of the best institutions in the world being part of that research. And I was telling them on the WhatsApp that just because you sit under the feet of a professor, the courage you pushed me to get into that particular research that began in 2021 officially is basically the reason. So for me, I know what this means to learn this kind of research. I don't know what others it means to you, and I can tell you that I personally know that it means a lot to all of us here. Maybe Jovita, what does this, I don't know, how is this research coming around? Jovita, are you there?
Hello, Dr. Caroline.
Yes, Rakome.
Hello, yeah, greetings from Bujumbura.
Yes.
In fact, this has been a very interesting learning journey for me. Studying from another context, another country, and just receiving this very rich lecture from Professor Ayiro has been a very, very exciting opportunity for me. I remember discussing with my master's student, with my master's class fellow scholars or fellow students, and I was telling them how enriched I am with this particular course, and I really wish to thank Professor Ayiro for the knowledge he's impacting on us. In fact, the way he breaks down this particular course it's like you've not studied the topic before. It's so interesting. And even when I get to read the textbook and just have more understanding in my quiet time, I really, really appreciate the unit, not just for validating the course, but also enriching my professional knowledge in carrying out research and just personal development, apart from knowing that this is for educational purpose, contributing to knowledge. It is very enriching personally. So I really, really appreciate this.
Wonderful. Kelly, Kelly, of course, Hussein, you are there. You've raised your hand. Kelly, it's nice to also have sometimes your face so that VC can always remember when he's remembering participation, he can remember to add a 0.2 mark.
Good morning,
Yes,
everyone.
Kelly.
And thank you so much, Professor, for this particular session. I think for me, one of the things that is really on my mind is on the research problem. And it's about ensuring that we just don't dance on the periphery and ensure that whatever problem that you're solving is something that is going to make an impact in the various workplaces and various levels that you're working at. So this is something that has really meant that I have to keep on thinking as I'm reading through and identifying various issues within literature or various issues within my workplace. I can ask myself, how will this be something that actually solves an actual problem? So thank you so much, Prof, for that.
Right, thank you so much. And Prof, just to acknowledge, these students are quite amazing. They are really connecting us with quite a lot of researchers around. Kelly, we acknowledge your association with the German institutions to see whether we can partner up, and we appreciate. Hussein and Zara, and then Zara, then we are done. Hussein?
Thank you very much, Prof. And today I am connecting from Rome, Italy, where I'm attending a seminar or a conference. And as I attend, I'm also reading the book that Professor wrote. It is The Art of Institutional Leadership. which has contributed a lot to me. That means I am also researching what Prof has done before. I bought this book on my way to Rome from Nairobi and Canvas and Daystar. So what Prof says and what is written in the book, they really complement. I would also encourage my fellow students to buy that book because it will help them a lot. It has really helped me. I was able to quote some of this during my presentation, yesterday's presentation in the workshop. And it is like I'm learning new research methodology in my first time when I attended this class. I really appreciate this, and thanks to Prof and my fellow students as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hussein, and glad to have seen you when you bought the book. Now, that's a different book that you people don't know about. It's called The Art of Institutional Leadership. This book is amazing, and some of these dispatches that Prof has just talked about are quoted in that book. But more important is how he approaches leadership in terms of style. So we can't wait to see most of you on 8th March. Literally, just come for the sake of your first supervisor who is already given himself to offer you, especially PhD students. And for VC, you know, you will be his student. Whether his term ends as a vice chancellor, he will definitely be there for you to ensure that you graduate on the time that he's there. So it will be nice to see all of you to come, the 90 or the 80 of you joining us on that particular day. Zara, the last person, you can say something. I don't know which one is the class president for this particular group, but Zara.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak. For me, it's really demystifying a lot of areas of research. Being a previous Daystar student and having learned on research, it still gives me further insight, fresh perspectives on how to go about my thesis now. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Okay. Carol, can we close? I need to get running.
I wanted to ask on their behalf, Prof, the next week quiz. What if we give the quiz, if it's an MCQ requesting whether that's something you would like to consider? What if we give until we give some hours for those who are in different times? I've seen one saying he will be on the way. We can then begin them but we can have the quiz begin the previous evening through the first hour of your class, so that everybody ends that particular time and they can start on their own time, but as long as they finish by the first hour of your class, but we start rolling over the quiz the previous day. I don't know if that's acceptable.
Okay, that's fine. That's okay.
Right. Okay.
That's okay.
So thank you so much. So
okay, bye-bye.
We wish you well as you go to the students, and thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
So
thank you. Bye-bye.
Now he has gone.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
So
Dr. Mwaka,
I'm sure the quiz comes. Oh, let me stop the YouTube.
Dr. Mwaka.
Karo, I have a question.
Dr. Mwaka.
Yes.
I'm here.